Did I really think ditching our anniversary dinner to spend the evening with his best friend was just two people enjoying a meal? Did I believe that walking back into our house after midnight, smelling of someone else's restaurant, could be held together with one calm lie? I thought the rules of my marriage were flexible enough to bend without breaking. But quiet men keep records, and records do not forget. My name is Neve Callard. I am 31 years old, and I coordinate appointments at a dental practice, which means I spend my working days arranging other people's problems into neat 30-minute slots and smiling through the ones that do not fit. I am good at smiling. I am good at making difficult situations feel manageable from the outside, and I had spent the better part of a year telling myself that the distance growing inside my marriage was the marriage's fault rather than a choice I was making incrementally, a little more each week. The morning it began to matter was at a car dealership waiting lounge, beige plastic chairs, a coffee station with two options, a television on the wall showing a property program at half volume. Dominic was at the service counter speaking to an advisor about the brakes. I sat with my phone face down on my knee and told myself this was what we had become. Two people in a waiting room, silent by arrangement. A message arrived from Seb. He was asking whether Thursday still worked for the Merchant Lane Bistro. I typed yes and turned the phone face down again. The key fob for our shared car lay on the chair arm beside me, its black casing cracked across the top from a fall last autumn that neither of us had bothered to fix. I looked at the crack for a moment and thought nothing useful about it. Dominic came back and asked if I was okay because I seemed somewhere else. He named it plainly, without accusation, and I had trained myself to experience his attention as a form of pressure rather than a form of care. I said I was tired. He accepted this, and I filed his acceptance as evidence of absence rather than patience. That afternoon in the dental office break room, I described Seb to my coworker Cass in 3 sentences that did not include the word affair. I said he actually understood me. She said I deserved that, and I stored this response as confirmation that I was right about everything. At dinner, Dominic had cooked. Our daughter Mara talked about a school weather project, and he passed me the salt before I asked for it. I told myself a man who knows your habits has not actually bothered to know you. After Mara was in bed, he sat across from me at the kitchen table and asked whether something at work was difficult or whether I needed something different at home, noting 3 evenings in the last 2 weeks when I came home after 9, 2 more than usual. I told him that calm questions which tracked my schedule felt like surveillance wearing a different outfit. He said okay, picked up his cup, and did not push. The cracked key fob caught the hallway light from the bowl by the door, and I did not think about what it would take to replace it. The anniversary dinner was my reservation. I had booked a Caslon table myself 2 months earlier. The fixed menu, the white tablecloths, the same table we had sat at 8 years before, on a night that felt like something it no longer was. I spent the drive to work that morning converting the booking into a grievance, telling myself Dominic would have made the evening feel like an annual review, that I deserved a dinner that felt like living rather than accounting, and that this was not a selfish conclusion, but a self-aware one. I also told myself the marriage had grown hollow before any of my choices, which meant the choices were responses to a situation rather than contributions to it, and the logic of this had become so practiced it arrived automatically now, without effort or examination. At 6:15, I was in the dental practice staff bathroom changing into a green dress I had bought 2 weeks earlier and told nobody about. I told myself the dress was about feeling like myself, and the story had been repeated often enough that it had developed the texture of truth. I adjusted the neckline in the small mirror above the sink and then walked to the corridor near reception and called Dominic. I told him in a steady voice that a client had rung in distress and that I was so sorry and would make it up to him properly. My voice was steady because I had scripted the call since 4 in the afternoon and rehearsed it twice. He said he understood and hoped the client was okay, and he did not ask a single follow-up question about the nature of the distress, which I read as acceptance rather than as the careful attention of a man who was deciding something privately. The Merchant Lane Bistro had a back table away from the street window, and the room was softly lit in the way that makes everyone look slightly better than they do in ordinary light. Seb had already ordered wine. We talked about things I had stopped discussing with Dominic, a food venture idea Seb had been developing for 2 years, a coastal town we had both visited at different points in our lives, small biographical details that arrived in that room with the quality of discovery. The conversation moved the way conversations do when two people have decided the evening belongs only to them, and I told myself this was what real conversation felt like, and I believed it because I had been saying it long enough that the saying had displaced the examining. The bistro window was frosted on the lower half and clear on the upper, and in the gap above the frosting she could see the top of the street's evening traffic and the lit windows of the building across the road. Nobody in any of those windows was looking at her. She was in a room nobody else had access to, at a table she had chosen, in a dress that fit the occasion exactly, and the city outside moved at its own pace without any reference to what was happening at this table. And this felt, for a stretch of the second glass, like the precise experience of freedom. She did not examine why freedom required an audience of 0 rather than the audience of 1 she had at home. She poured another small measure into her glass and let the thought go. At some point during the second glass, Seb's co-worker Patrick appeared at the staircase setting up an event on the upper floor, waved at Seb, and his phone was visible in his shirt pocket with the camera app open. I registered this the way you register something that seems irrelevant in a cooperative evening, and I kept talking. Patrick said something brief about the setup upstairs and then went back, and the room returned to its private quality. Dominic arrived at Caslon Table at 7. He sent one text at 7:12. He ordered sparkling water at 7:20. He waited 38 minutes before calling. I was at the bistro table when my phone vibrated with his ringtone, and I silenced it and walked to the corridor near the restrooms and called back. He picked up on the second ring. I used the scripted version. He said he hoped the client was okay and nothing else, and the nothing else was the sound of a man holding something in rather than releasing it, which I chose to interpret as composure rather than patience. I came home after midnight. The living room light was on. Dominic was on the sofa with his jacket on the chair arm and his shoes at the door in their usual position, and the restaurant's printed reservation confirmation sat on the coffee table face up, placed not as an accusation, but as a fact, positioned inside the room so that no one could later claim it had not been there. He was not performing distress. He asked me directly and without theatre why the emergency had required a physical visit when the dental practice's after-hours protocol involved phone triage only and not home calls. He had looked this up on the practice website when I called, because my voice had been too composed for a genuine crisis, and he needed one specific piece of information: the client's name and what the practice's communication log showed for that evening. If the record confirmed his account, he said, he would accept the matter entirely and not raise it again. I told him the client had a right to privacy, that he had spent 60 minutes auditing the dental practice's protocols while I was on the phone, and that a husband who researched his wife's workplace guidelines to verify her story was not practicing trust, but practicing investigation. He said he had looked it up because her voice had been calm for someone in a genuine emergency, and that honesty at 6 o'clock would have been fine, and that he would have cancelled the table without any complaint if she had simply told him the truth before either of them spent the evening as they had spent it. He said he understood, set his phone down, and did not argue further. Below the reservation confirmation was his personal planner, open to a page with a date circled in red and the words Alderton and March, 9:15 a.m. in his handwriting. I set the planner back without asking what that address was. Upstairs, the shower was running at 12:51 in the morning, which was not when he showered, and the function of a shower at that hour was something I could not identify from where I stood on the landing. Through the gap in the bathroom door, his phone screen showed a brief notification, "File uploaded successfully," before it timed out. I went to the guest room and lay on top of the covers and told myself I was a woman making reasonable choices about a hollow marriage. Len's 40th birthday was held at the community centre hall on a Saturday in early autumn, and the rooms smelled of balloon rubber and food warming under lights, and the warmth of rented equipment in a space that becomes temporary at every event and returns to a neutral hall the morning after. Clusters of 3 balloons marked each table. The DJ corner held a speaker stack and cables, and a long strip of black gaffer tape ran across the floor from the sound equipment to the power board at the far wall. 40 people crossed that tape strip all evening without noticing it. I noticed it once coming back from the bathroom, a deliberate flat line across a floor that was trying to look festive. And then I stopped thinking about it. Seb arrived alone, which was not unusual at events we all shared, and he had been Dominic's closest friend for 12 years, so his presence was natural to everyone who saw him come in. He hugged Dominic first, which was the visible and correct sequence, and then he hugged me, and the hug lasted 3 seconds longer than Dominic's, and I laughed at something he said near my ear without tracking the fact that Joelle was at the buffet table 2 meters behind me. Joelle raised her eyebrows briefly at Len. Len looked at the warming tray in front of him and said nothing. Over the next 2 hours, Seb and I settled into the far corner with a naturalness I described to myself as 2 people who genuinely enjoy each other's company at a party, which is not technically wrong in any individual moment and is entirely wrong as a complete account of the evening. When Dominic came across the room to ask us to join the main table for the birthday toast, I said in a flat, audible tone that we could hear perfectly from where we stood, and I did not move, and Seb neither moved nor suggested I should. The 2 of us stayed in the corner while Dominic turned and walked back to the table alone. Estelle, Dominic's mother, 67, a woman whose stillness communicates more than other people manage with full sentences, watched me for a calibrated moment and then turned to the woman beside her and began a different conversation. The deliberateness of that turn was registered by at least 2 other people in the room, though not by me. Dominic found me near the emergency exit alcove at the back of the hall, a small corridor space with a fire extinguisher on the wall and a cold metal push bar on the door behind him. The music was loud enough to cover the conversation from the main floor, but the exit alcove was 3 steps from where Estelle was collecting her coat. He spoke at the volume of a man who had chosen his setting with the precise awareness of someone who measures load-bearing tolerances for a living. He asked why the birthday toast was something to observe from across the room with Seb rather than with her husband, and whether she understood that people at this gathering, his mother specifically, were drawing clear conclusions about the arrangement of who stood where all evening. His specific question was about the DJ stand, the step she had taken towards Seb when they requested a song, the angle of her body at that moment. He said he had been at 6 years of shared social occasions alongside her and had never seen her posture align with another person's the way it had aligned with Seb's tonight. And the DJ stand was the one concrete, observable thing he was asking her to explain. She said she was allowed to have a good time at a birthday without providing a transcript, and that his need to read her movements like a structural calculation was exactly the reason the marriage felt like a measurement rather than a life, and that Seb made her feel like a person rather than an item on a shared calendar. She said this at a volume slightly above what the corridor required, which is what people do when they are confident they hold the stronger argument. The music dipped between tracks at that specific moment. Estelle was placing her coat over her arm. She heard the words "Seb makes me feel like a person" in the brief silence between songs. She did not react visibly. She picked up her bag, crossed the room to the main table, held both of Dominic's hands for a quiet moment, said genuine and careful goodbyes to him and to Len, and left at 9:40 without acknowledging Neve. When Joelle gave the birthday speech, everything was normal for 4 minutes. Then Neve offered a spontaneous additional toast about people who make life feel alive, and she was looking at Seb while she spoke, and the direction of her gaze was visible from the main table and the DJ corner and several points around the buffet. Joelle finished the formal toast herself quickly and redirected the room's attention to Len. Dominic held his glass and did not drink. In the parking lot, Priya was waiting beside her car. She held out her phone, the tagged Instagram story from Patrick's account, the bistro corner table, the green dress, the wine glass in frame, and the date stamp from 3 weeks before the anniversary evening. She asked whether Dominic knew. Neve said it was a professional lunch, and the photograph was meaningless without context, and Priya was inserting herself into a situation she did not have the full picture of. Priya said the date stamp was the evening Dominic had told her he waited 38 minutes at Caslon table, and the dress was not one Neve wore to any professional appointment she was aware of. Neve said Priya was projecting meaning onto a casual photograph. Priya said she had enough context now, and she walked back inside at an ordinary pace. On the drive home, Dominic said he had spoken to Priya for 3 minutes and now understood what the photograph showed, and that he would appreciate a private conversation in the morning after Mara left for school. Neve said there was nothing to explain. He used the word tomorrow as if it were an appointment already confirmed in a system she did not have access to, and the steadiness of his hands on the wheel was the particular steadiness of a man who has already organised what comes next. Tuesday evening at Joelle and Len's kitchen, the pasta smell still in the air from dinner, the wood island between them, the overhead light left off because no one had turned it on when they came in, and no one had asked. Neve laid out the last 2 months with the organised fluency of someone presenting a plan that has not yet been officially challenged. She said Dominic had grown emotionally remote in a way that had been developing gradually over more than a year, that Seb filled a gap the marriage had stopped filling, that Priya had overread a photograph taken at a professional lunch, and that the hollowness in the marriage predated every choice she had made by at least 18 months. She moved through each point with the brisk confidence of a person who has organised their internal account into something that covers the facts without actually accounting for all of them. Joelle said she believed Neve was unhappy, and she said it with genuine warmth and without challenge in her voice. Then she added carefully, choosing each word before placing it, that she had seen the anniversary dinner confirmation on the shared couple's calendar when she was organising her own schedule, and she asked whether Dominic understood the full extent of what the friendship with Seb involved. Neve said Dominic knew Seb was her friend. Joelle did not push the point further. Len looked into his coffee mug and offered nothing that aligned with Neve's account. Dominic arrived at 9. He said good evening to Joelle and Len with the same natural courtesy he brought to every social occasion, regardless of what was happening privately, the kind of courtesy that functions identically whether the evening is ordinary or consequential. He asked Neve if she would come outside with him for a moment before they drove home. On the front doorstep with the porch light on and the dark street behind him, he said he knew about Seb. Not every detail, but enough to understand the shape of what had been happening. And he wanted one private conversation to understand whether she wanted to work towards something real or whether she had already decided on a different direction. His trap question arrived directly and without preamble. He asked whether the emergency client call on their anniversary night could be verified through the dental practice's own appointment and communication log. Because if the record supported what she had described, he would apologise and let the question go permanently. But if the practice's system showed no emergency protocol had been activated on that evening, he needed them both to stop maintaining a version of that night that the practice's own documentation did not support. She said he was standing on her friend's doorstep conducting a review whose outcome had already been determined. He said he was not asking for this conversation on a doorstep. He was asking for a private morning at home, just the two of them, no performance required. He said he would go home and wait. He walked to the car without touching her. 2 days later, Mara was in the back seat on the school run, and the radio played something cheerful and entirely unsuitable for the question she asked. She wanted to know whether Daddy's friend Seb was coming to her birthday because she had heard Daddy on the phone saying Seb could not come to things anymore, and she thought they were supposed to be best friends. Neve kept her voice completely level and said adult schedules were complicated and changed sometimes. Mara looked out the window with the particular patience of a 9-year-old who has accepted an answer that does not satisfy her, and the radio kept playing until the school gate. At work the following day, Neve told the story to Cass over the break room kettle. Not the full account, but the version in which Dominic's behaviour was the organising problem and her own choices were reasonable responses. She described the calendar checking and the doorstep appearance, and the guest room move as a pattern of monitoring, and Cass listened with the specific empathy of someone who has heard one side of a two-sided story and is too kind to name this while the kettle boils. Cass said it sounded suffocating. Neve agreed. Neve did not mention the anniversary dinner, the bistro photograph, or the rooftop bar. These omissions did not register to her as distortions. She experienced them as irrelevancies, the way a person experiencing selective memory experiences the gaps, not as absence, but as simply not there. At the pharmacy 2 days after that, 3 people ahead of her in the narrow queue beside the seasonal display shelves, the number 42 bus idled at the stop outside, and diesel exhaust drifted through a gap in the sliding door in a faint, warm current that mixed with the pharmacy's antiseptic air. Priya was 2 aisles over through the shelving gaps, speaking quietly into her phone. Neve caught fragments, Dominic's name, the word appointment Thursday. And then, one complete phrase that arrived without static. The photos are already stored, Dom. Just make sure the folder is somewhere she cannot accidentally delete. The queue moved forward. Neve did not move with it for a moment. Then the sliding door closed and cut the diesel smell, and the queue settled back to its ordinary rhythm. That evening she went to Dominic at his home desk while he was reviewing structural drawings. She used a calm voice and direct eye contact and said she wanted to be honest with him, a sentence she had composed on the drive home. She said she had been emotionally close to Seb in a way she should have addressed sooner, that she was willing to put distance between them if it would help, and she described it throughout as a friendship that had filled something the marriage had stopped providing, carefully keeping the word friendship in every version of the statement. Dominic listened until she finished and then asked one question. Did this honesty include the anniversary dinner? She paused and then said the anniversary dinner was a mistake in timing, but not a betrayal in the sense he seemed to mean. He thanked her for sharing it and said he would think about what she had told him. He closed the drawing folder. Behind it on the desk sat a manila envelope with Thursday's date in his handwriting on the tab. On the shared family calendar app she checked later that night, one entry appeared in his colour. Caldwell Street, 10 a.m. No name, no participants, no detail beyond the address. She took a screenshot and the phone stored it quietly in her gallery. In the week after the controlled bargain, Dominic's home desk changed shape. The drawing rolls moved to a labelled archive box near the door, and the desk itself held only one slim black binder with a single coloured tab visible at the top. His laptop was always closed when she entered the room. His phone charged at the desk rather than the bedroom pad, always face down, always within arm's reach. A flat key appeared on the hook inside the front door with a number stamped into the metal. Not the car, not the house, not any cabinet she recognised. She told herself this was his obsessive approach to administrative logistics, the way a structural engineer behaves when he decides to treat his personal life like a project with documentation requirements. She did not ask about the key. At dinner, he mentioned the joint car insurance renewal in the neutral tone of a billing conversation, saying he was handling it separately this year for administrative simplicity. He asked whether her name still appeared on the dental practice's emergency contact form and whether it routed to her personal phone or the practice landline. She said her personal phone. He wrote one line on the counter notepad, tore the page off, and placed it in his shirt pocket. She watched the sequence: write, tear, fold, pocket, and assigned it to the same internal category as the binder and the closed laptop and the unfamiliar key. On a Tuesday that was not his home office day, she was in the kitchen at 4:15 when she saw his car in the building car park below. She went to the window. He came out of the ground floor door with his phone at his ear and a burgundy document sleeve under his arm. He stopped at the car boot, ended the call, opened the boot, placed the sleeve inside with the deliberateness of someone placing something important rather than routine, and closed the boot. He did not look up toward the building. He went back inside. The sleeve was the same burgundy she had seen on the binder tab, and she stood at the window a moment longer than was necessary. Friday evening at the Ashfield Quarter rooftop bar, she posted from the terrace at 9:47. Both of them in frame, the city lit below, a caption about good nights and better views, the location tagged publicly. Joelle texted within 6 minutes to say Dominic's work contacts followed that account and to please take it down immediately. She replied that she was allowed to be happy, and the post stayed live. What she did not know was that Priya had already screenshotted it at 9:51 and sent it to Dominic with a timestamp note in the message before Neve had finished reading Joelle's warning. 2 days after that, she sent a message to 8 people describing the past 3 weeks as a documented pattern. The calendar surveillance, the doorstep conversation at Joelle's house, the unannounced guest room move without discussion, and the deliberate involvement of his sister in a private marriage. She sent it from her personal phone at 2:17 in the afternoon and asked whether any of them would feel controlled living this way. Joelle called within an hour, not to agree but to warn her that Cass had mentioned the message to a colleague whose professional network overlapped with Dominic's firm, and the message was no longer contained to the original 8 people. Neve said he was welcome to read exactly how she felt, because the feelings were accurate and she stood by every word. 3 hours after sending the message, Cass texted separately to say that a member of Dominic's structural engineering firm had seen the message forwarded through an intermediary and had read it. Neve read this and felt the first thin draft of something that was not confidence. She told herself that a professional contact she had never met was not a consequence. She sent Cass a reply saying it was fine and that truth had a way of surviving forwarding. She sent Joelle a follow-up saying the message had been honest and she did not regret sending it. Joelle read it and did not reply for 4 hours. That night, Dominic was already in the living room when she came downstairs, sitting in the chair across from the sofa, with his phone face down on the table and no domestic routine framing the space. He said this was the last honest conversation he was going to request. He named 3 things in plain sequence: the anniversary dinner, the rooftop bar post on Friday, the group message sent Tuesday afternoon. He said none of these were accusations in that moment. They were a description of what now existed outside the room, outside the marriage, independently of anything either of them could choose to present. His question was whether she could describe a version of the last 12 weeks that would hold up in front of any neutral third party reviewing the documented record, because that review was no longer hypothetical. The record existed independently of their home, and her stated version and the documented account were not the same. If she wanted to sit down with anyone neutral, a counsellor, a mediator, anyone she trusted, he would be there in the morning. If not, he would handle things through the appropriate channel, and she would hear from him that way. He said all of this without cruelty, without raising his voice, without a single dramatic gesture. She told him he was dressing intimidation in the language of calm, and she knew her rights, and she would not engage with a process whose outcome had been determined by the person conducting it. He said he understood. He picked up his keys from the table. The flat, unknown key was gone from the ring. She caught its absence in the half-second before she could organise her face. He left at 9:53. His car sat facing outward in the driveway. Upstairs, the guest room door stood slightly open. The bed had hospital corners, his, not hers. His overnight bag was gone from the top shelf of the wardrobe. A single charger cable sat coiled and unplugged on the nightstand, left behind as the only object in a room that had been vacated with deliberateness. Her phone showed a text from Cass at 10:15. Dominic had arrived at the dental practice at 5 that afternoon, asked to speak with the practice manager, and had been in the building for 20 minutes, and Cass was sorry because she had not known what to say when he was there. He texted with the flatness of a bill notification. A joint account review at the Caldwell Street branch, 10:30 Thursday. Both signatures might be needed. She read it in the dental practice car park and told Cass it was probably the renewal paperwork. The bank branch had pale marble tiles, a ticket dispenser by the door, and 2 padded waiting benches. A fish tank in the corner held 2 slow orange fish, making careful semicircles. She arrived 2 minutes before 10:30. Dominic was on the far bench with the burgundy sleeve on his knee. A man in a plain suit sat on the near bench and looked at her with the specific attentiveness of someone who had been given her name and was waiting to confirm it. She sat one bench over from Dominic. He nodded. Nothing in his face indicated what was coming. In the glass-walled side office, the manager set out a water glass. Dominic placed 4 documents on the desk. A petition for dissolution of marriage with temporary financial and property orders already filed. A freezing notice for both joint accounts and the joint credit line. A financial separation document. And a 2-page draft interim custody arrangement for Mara with a 14-day response window. The manager confirmed both accounts were flagged and no joint transactions were possible from that hour forward. The man from the near bench stepped into the doorway, stated her full name, placed a sealed envelope in her hands, and confirmed the time, 10:41. He left. The evidence schedule was 8 pages. The bistro-tagged photo screenshotted before the archive completed. Priya's signed parking lot statement. The rooftop bar post still live and geotagged. The group message with device signature and timestamp. A dental practice record confirming no emergency protocol was activated on the anniversary evening. And a timeline of 12 dated dialogue attempts. She said Priya's screenshot had been taken without consent. The manager indicated the petition's response date. Dominic closed the sleeve, thanked the manager, and walked out without looking at her. She called the number stored for him, and it rang once and went to a generic voicemail with no personal greeting. She called Joelle, who listened for 15 seconds and said she needed her own legal representation and she could not change anything in the schedule. She walked out of the Caldwell Street branch and the number 42 bus pulled from the stop outside, and diesel exhaust hit her face in a brief warm cloud, the same smell as the pharmacy queue where she had heard the photos are already stored. She had believed the rooftop bar photograph was proof that she was not invisible, not reduced, not waiting for a life that had moved on without her. But the photograph was a geotag and a public timestamp with her face in focus, and it travelled from a phone screen to a screenshot to a numbered item in a solicitor's evidence schedule in 9 days. Every public act she staged to prove she could not be managed had made her traceable. What she called freedom was page 7 of 8. Mara's school drop-off runs through Dominic's schedule on Tuesdays and Thursdays now. The joint streaming subscription deactivated 11 days after the service date. The rooftop bar post lost 18 likes that week, most of them from contacts who had never met her in person. Seb replied to her first message 3 days later with one sentence saying they should not be in contact for a while. The green dress is in a bag at the back of my parents' wardrobe because I packed it without thinking and cannot explain it when I find it. The cracked black key fob is in the bowl by the front door of my old bedroom. The Caslon table reservation was the last item I deleted from the shared family calendar, and when I pressed delete, it felt like nothing in particular, which was the exact feeling I had spent 18 months trying to avoid, and it turned out the avoidance had been the most expensive part of all.